Good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to the Canvas Radio Report on WVOX AM 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. This is Jack Woodruff with Ken Kraser, bringing you this half hour of discussion of issues related to veterans and the active military. Now, here's Ken.
Hey, thanks, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone listening to Canvas Media here on WVOX 1460 AM. Jack, thanks for covering while I was in Washington last Monday at the Association of the U.S. Army Conference. We kind of had a big day. We talked to the Secretary of the Army and we talked to the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, General McConville, at their press conference. And we did an interview with our friend Admiral Terry McKnight, who's a frequent guest. And then we talked to the officer in charge of the entire Army ROTC program. And we'll be playing that interview. It'll be up on our YouTube page very shortly. And we're working with a special interview with an officer who used to work at West Point. He's now got a big job in Europe, and we're working on that one. Mm-hmm. And Saturday, we were covering the Army football game against Colgate, and the Army had a big day, 42-17. They won with a bunch of players out hurt. They had 5 starters out hurt, and they still dominated. Their quarterback, Janelle Jones, is the number 3 quarterback, but a senior, played really well. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have some of the interview or the comments we got with the Secretary of the Army, Christine Warmuth, and also the interview we did a week before at the Navy League event with Admiral James Fogo, former commander of the United States Navy for Europe, at the Navy League event. So Jack, tell us your stories today.
Well, I'll start off with what's happening in Ukraine. Last Monday, Russia fired 84 missiles, many at Ukraine civilian infrastructure targets, causing power outages in many cities. Tuesday, Russia launched another 28 cruise missiles. And on Thursday, the Ukrainian Armed Forces General Staff said Russia had hit more than 40 settlements since the day before. In all, more than 3 dozen people were sadly killed. And according to Konrad Muzyka, founder of the Gdansk, Poland-based Rokon Consulting firm, they are low on precision-guided missiles, according to Russia. That's essentially the only explanation that we has for what's happening here. And even as NATO allies on Thursday said that they would rush additional air forces to Ukraine, experts say the reason Russia has had yet to knock out electricity and water service across the country was simple, because they can't. And since May, Russia's use of precision-guided missiles, PGMs, has declined sharply, with analysts suggesting that Russia's stocks of such missiles may be low. But Tuesday's attacks were mainly used air-launched cruise missiles, which are slower than Iskander guided missiles and are easier for Ukraine to shoot down. And in March, the Pentagon reported that Russia's air-launched cruise missiles have had a failure rate of 20 to 60%. And according to Muzyka again, if Russia had a limitless supply of PGMs, I think they would still strike civilian targets, because that's what Russian way of warfare is. So the analysts did not have confirmed information about Russian missile stocks or production levels, and judgments were based on the decline in usage of PGMs and Moscow's greater reliance on less accurate missiles. But a clue lies in Russia's failure to destroy the kind of targets that Ukraine is able to hit using U.S.-supplied HIMARS artillery. And that HIMARS system, rocket launches that the U.S. has supplied, done a lot of damage to Russian supply routes, and essentially their ability to sustain the war. It's done massive damage to Russia's posture in the war. So a lot of interesting things happening right there. Sounds like the Russians might be low on those precision-guided missiles, and don't really have very good missile technology there. And on the other hand, you have those great rocket systems from the United States really damaging them.
Well, the United States and NATO, that came up at the conference, and one of the things that the U.S. military, one of the speakers said, is that whenever Ukraine asks for something from the U.S. arsenal or from one of the NATO arsenals, it's based on its availability, and that would not deplete the U.S. stockpiles of that particular armament. And they were very particular to say that. But gosh, this is just a slug-it-out conflict, and the Russians are using longer-range artillery to strike civilian targets, which many call a war crime. Mm-hmm. And then you have Ukrainians with limited ability to strike long range. U.S. is providing longer-range artillery, and so The question is, will the call-ups that the Russians made of their military individuals, will that make any difference? The thinking is that won't, and then what will Russia do then is really the unknown factor that most of the analysts are speculating on. Would they go to the peace table and negotiate something, or will they use, the worst fear is that they might try one of these battlefield nuclear weapons, small range, but boy, that would really put the world in a situation it hasn't been before.
Yeah, that would be very scary. Now, also last week, the Department of Defense announced the authorization of another presidential drawdown of security assistance valued at up to $725 million to meet Ukraine's critical security and defense needs. Now, this package includes additional ammunition for the rocket systems we were just talking about, the HIM-ARS, as well as 23,000 155 millimeter artillery rounds, 500 precision-guided 155 millimeter artillery rounds, 5,000 155 millimeter rounds of remote anti-armor mine systems, 5,000 anti-tank weapons, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, more than 200 high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, small arms, and more than 2 million rounds of small arms ammunition, medical supplies. And also, Secretary of Defense Austin had a gathering of defense ministers of nearly 50 countries at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in Brussels this week. And other countries are also assisting Ukraine. Germany recently delivered the first of 4 IRIS-T air defense systems committed to Ukraine. Critical donation will help Ukraine better defend its civilians from Russian airstrikes. Germany also recently announced that it would deliver more MARS rocket systems and howitzers. Spain announced it will provide 4 Hawk launchers to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. Hawk launchers, those launch Hawk anti-air missiles. So that's a big help from Spain there. Also, Norway, Germany, and Denmark invested into Slovakia's indigenous production of howitzers. So a lot of countries coming together to provide aid to Ukraine. Now, altogether, the U.S. has provided $18.2 billion in aid to Ukraine.
Well, it's a very unified NATO effort. They've seen what Russian military has done to civilian targets, and hopefully, the question is how much the Ukrainians can take back before the winter weather sets in, which generally puts a stop on military advances. But with the war being fought by long-range artillery, that doesn't stop because it's winter. So, but the question is how much land can the Ukrainians take back, and they seem to be making progress on a daily basis. But then again, what are the Russians going to do when they're getting pushed back into their own country? And will the Ukraine stop when they get to the Russian border? It's sort of like that dilemma the United States had in Korea, in the Korean War. So it's going to be, it's a very volatile situation, to say the least.
Indeed, and shifting to the Middle East, the U.S. Navy and its partners in the Middle East are scaling up the number and the complexity of unmanned boats and artificial intelligence tools operating under Task Force 59, creating an extensive web that can flag unusual activity for human operators. Now, today in the Arabian Gulf, there's about 8,000 ships that are underway doing something. And Task Force 59, they announced earlier this year to form a multinational fleet of 100 USVs by next summer. 20 would belong to the U.S., with the Navy leasing the USVs from industry, but controlling their missions. The Fifth Fleet said Task Force 59 to boost maritime domain awareness in the crowded and vulnerable waterways. The Navy has built up a mesh network to connect these unmanned surface vehicles. So the increased number of USVs in the Middle East there.
Drones are a big topic and a big operational capability now.
Indeed. You've been listening to CanVest Radio Report on WVOX AM 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. We'll be right back after this brief Fox News break, so stay tuned.
With world and national news, here is the latest update from Fox News Radio on 1460 WVOX.